Colonel Frank Martinez sat behind his metal desk in the command center of the UES Defiance and looked at the pile of papers in front of him with tired eyes that had seen too many battles against alien forces across the galaxy, and knew that finding good soldiers was getting harder every day as the war with the Zephyrians dragged on for months without any clear victory in sight. The morning light from the ship's artificial sun system cast long shadows across his office walls that were covered with maps of star systems and battle reports from the outer colonies, where human settlements were under constant attack from the deadly alien warriors who seemed to enjoy killing humans for sport rather than any strategic purpose. Lieutenant Kevin Ross knocked on the door and entered carrying another stack of application files for the elite Xenocombat Division, which was the most dangerous and selective military unit in the entire human fleet because they fought the aliens up close with nothing but their training and weapons, while regular soldiers could at least hide behind ship shields and long-range missiles. Sir, we have more applications for review, and High Command wants the new recruits selected by next week because we lost another squad on Titan base yesterday and need replacements fast, Kevin said as he placed the files on Martinez's already crowded desk. Martinez picked up the first file and read through it quickly before moving to the next one, and then the next one, while making notes about which candidates might survive more than 5 minutes against Zephyrian shock troops who were twice as strong as humans and moved faster than most people could even see during combat. The applications were mostly from regular infantry soldiers who had survived at least 3 alien encounters and wanted to join the Special Forces unit that fought the most dangerous missions against enemy strongholds and command centers, deep in hostile territory where backup was never coming if things went wrong. Most of these look standard, but this one is different, Kevin said as he pointed to a file near the bottom of the stack, with a name written in neat handwriting across the top. Martinez picked up the file and opened it to see a photograph of a young woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, who looked more like she belonged in a magazine than on a battlefield fighting aliens with razor-sharp claws and weapons that could cut through metal like paper. Lisa Blake, former entertainment industry professional turned combat specialist. Martinez read aloud, and then looked up at Kevin with a confused expression on his weathered face. Entertainment industry. What does that even mean in military terms? Martinez asked as he flipped through the pages of her application, which listed experience in action films and stunt coordination, along with something called fight choreography. Kevin shrugged his shoulders because he had never seen an application like this, one either, and was not sure what to make of someone who had worked in movies trying to join the most elite fighting unit in the human military. It says here, she worked on action films for 5 years before applying to join the Colonial Defense Forces and has been serving on frontier worlds for the past 3 years, Kevin explained as he read from his notes. Martinez laughed out loud and shook his head, because the idea of someone who pretended to fight aliens for cameras thinking they could handle real combat against creatures that had killed thousands of trained soldiers was completely ridiculous. Hollywood wannabes trying to play soldier. This is exactly what we do not need in the Xenocombat Division, Martinez said as he tossed the file toward the rejection pile without reading the rest of her qualifications. Sir, maybe we should at least look at her combat certifications because she does have real military experience from the outer colonies, Kevin suggested carefully, because he knew Martinez did not like being questioned about his decisions. Combat experience from what teaching actors how to fake fight scenes on movie sets, Martinez replied with another laugh as he picked up the next application file. The application says she has real combat experience against Zephyrian forces on 3 different colony worlds and received commendations for bravery under fire. Kevin continued reading from the file, even though Martinez had already rejected it. Martinez stopped reading the other applications and looked up at his aide with the expression of someone who had heard enough nonsense for one day and was not interested in hearing any more ridiculous suggestions about recruiting former movie people. Listen, Kevin, we are trying to build a unit that can survive against the deadliest aliens in the galaxy, not put together some kind of entertainment show for the troops, Martinez said firmly. But sir, her test scores are actually quite impressive and she has certifications in multiple weapon systems and hand-to-hand combat techniques, Kevin pointed out as he continued reading through Lisa Blake's file. Test scores from what, shooting blanks at pretend aliens on a movie set, Martinez replied as he stood up from his chair and walked over to the window that showed the vast emptiness of space beyond the ship. The colonel had seen too many good soldiers die because they were not prepared for the brutal reality of fighting Zephyrians who did not follow human rules of combat and would use any dirty trick or surprise attack to kill their enemies as slowly and painfully as possible. I have been fighting these aliens for 10 years, and I have seen what happens when soldiers are not properly trained for real combat against real enemies who want to tear them apart with their bare claws, Martinez said, as he looked out at the stars. Entertainment industry experience means absolutely nothing when you are face to face with a 9-foot tall alien warrior who can rip your head off with one hand and enjoys doing it, he continued. Kevin nodded because he understood that Martinez had very good reasons for being careful about who joined the Xenocombat Division since their survival rate was already lower than any other military unit in the human fleet. Should I put her file in the rejection pile then? Kevin asked, even though he could see that Martinez had already made up his mind about Lisa Blake. Yes, and make a note that we do not accept applications from people whose only qualification is pretending to be soldiers in movies, Martinez replied as he returned to his desk. What about her actual military service record from the Colonial Defense Forces? Kevin asked, one more time because he felt like they might be making a mistake. 3 years on Frontier Worlds probably means she was working in communications or supply logistics, not actual combat against alien forces, Martinez said dismissively. The file says she was assigned to forward combat units and participated in multiple engagements with enemy forces. Kevin read from the application. Martinez picked up the file again and flipped through it quickly, before closing it and dropping it into the rejection pile with a final shake of his head. Anyone can write anything on an application, Kevin, but when it comes to real combat against real aliens, there is no substitute for proper military training and experience gained through years of actual warfare, Martinez explained. Entertainment industry people think they know about fighting because they have watched action movies and learned some choreographed moves, but real combat is chaos and pain and death, not some carefully planned sequence of moves designed to look good on camera, he continued. Kevin gathered up the rejected application along with several others that Martinez had also turned down and prepared to file them away in the system as candidates who did not meet the requirements for the Xenocombat Division. I will send the rejection notices today, sir, Kevin said as he headed toward the door. Good, and make sure to include a note that suggests she might be better suited for the entertainment division if we had one, Martinez called after him with another laugh. The colonel returned to reviewing the remaining applications and tried to find candidates who had the kind of real military experience that would help them survive against the Zephyrian forces that were becoming more aggressive and better organized with each passing month of the war. 3 days after Colonel Martinez had rejected Lisa Blake's application, Admiral Patricia Stone contacted him directly through the secure communication system with news that made his morning coffee taste bitter and his mood turn sour because High Command was not happy with the recruitment numbers for the Xenocombat Division. Frank, we need to talk about your selection process because we are running out of qualified candidates, and the war is not going to wait for us to find perfect soldiers, Admiral Stone said through the holographic display that showed her stern face and gray hair, pulled back in a regulation. Bun Martinez sat straighter in his chair because Admiral Stone was not the kind of person who made casual calls, and when she used his first name, it usually meant he was about to receive orders that he would not like very much. Admiral, our standards exist for good reasons, and lowering them will only get more soldiers killed in combat against alien forces that show no mercy to the weak or unprepared, Martinez replied carefully. I understand your concerns, but we have lost 3 more squads this week and need replacements immediately, so I want you to review every application again, including the ones you rejected, Stone ordered. Martinez felt his stomach drop because he knew exactly which rejected application she was probably thinking about, and did not want to waste time on someone whose only qualification was pretending to be a soldier in entertainment productions. Admiral, with respect, some of those applications were rejected for very good reasons, and reconsidering them would be a mistake that could cost lives, Martinez said. That may be true, but High Command has reviewed some of the rejected files and believes you may have been too hasty in your decisions, particularly regarding candidates with unusual backgrounds. Stone replied. The Admiral's tone made it clear that this was not a suggestion, but a direct order from the highest levels of military command, and Martinez knew better than to argue further, even though he disagreed completely with the decision. "Which application specifically does High Command want me to reconsider?" Martinez asked, even though he suspected he already knew the answer. "All of them, but start with the ones that have actual combat experience regardless of their previous careers," Stone said before ending the communication. Martinez stared at the blank holographic display for several minutes while considering his options and realizing that he had none, because orders from High Command were not optional, even when they seemed completely unreasonable. Lieutenant Kevin Ross entered the office carrying the files of rejected applications and placed them on Martinez's desk with a slight smile that suggested he had overheard at least part of the conversation with Admiral Stone. "I take it we are reconsidering some of these applications, sir," Kevin said as he organized the files into neat piles. "Unfortunately, yes, and I suppose you want to start with your favorite entertainment industry candidate," Martinez replied with obvious reluctance. "Lisa Blake does have the most impressive combat record among the rejected applicants, even if her background is unusual," Kevin pointed out. Martinez picked up Blake's file again and read through it more carefully this time, while trying to ignore his prejudice against people from the entertainment industry who thought they could transition into real military service. "Fine, set up a holographic interview with her, but make it clear that this is just a formality to satisfy High Command, and not because I have changed my mind about her qualifications," Martinez ordered. Kevin nodded and began making the arrangements for the interview while Martinez continued reading through Blake's application and trying to find obvious flaws that would justify rejecting her again. 2 hours later, the holographic display in Martinez's office activated and showed Lisa Blake sitting in what appeared to be a small room aboard a transport ship somewhere in the outer colonies, where she was currently stationed. Blake appeared professional and composed with her blonde hair pulled back and wearing a standard military uniform that looked like it had seen actual use rather than just ceremonial occasions. "Colonel Martinez, thank you for reconsidering my application for the Xeno Combat Division," Blake said with a respectful tone that did not sound like someone trying to impress a superior officer. "Let me be clear that this interview is happening because High Command ordered it, not because I believe entertainment industry experience has any value in real military operations," Martinez replied bluntly. "I understand your skepticism, sir, and would probably feel the same way if our positions were reversed," Blake said calmly. Martinez leaned forward in his chair and decided to ask the questions that would expose her lack of real combat experience and prove that she was not qualified for elite military service. "Tell me about your transition from making movies to fighting aliens, because those seem like completely different skill sets to me," Martinez said. "The transition was not as dramatic as it might seem, because much of my entertainment work involved real combat situations that were filmed for both artistic and documentation purposes," Blake replied. Martinez raised an eyebrow because that answer was not what he had expected and suggested that there might be more to her background than he had initially understood. "What do you mean by real combat situations?" Martinez asked. "Many of the action sequences I worked on were filmed in active war zones during the early colonial conflicts and involved actual engagements with hostile forces rather than staged performances," Blake explained. "Are you telling me that you were shooting movies while real battles were happening around you?" Martinez asked with disbelief. "Not exactly, sir. The filming was integrated with military operations in ways that served both entertainment and strategic purposes," Blake said carefully. Martinez was becoming confused because her explanation did not make sense according to everything he knew about how movies were made and how military operations were conducted. "I need you to be more specific about what kind of work you actually did, because your answers are not clear enough for me to evaluate your qualifications," Martinez said. "I worked as part of a specialized unit that documented combat operations while participating in them directly, and my entertainment industry skills were adapted for use in actual warfare against alien forces," Blake replied. "That sounds like a very unusual arrangement, and I have never heard of any military unit that operated that way," Martinez said skeptically. The program was classified and involved only a small number of personnel with specific backgrounds that made them suitable for dual roles in combat and documentation. Blake explained. Martinez looked at Kevin, who was taking notes during the interview, and could see that his aide was as confused as he was about Blake's vague explanations of her military service. Can you give me specific examples of combat engagements you participated in and what your role was during those operations? Martinez asked. I was involved in 17 major engagements against Zephyrian forces over 3 years, including the defense of New Colorado and the evacuation of Titan Base, Blake said. Martinez knew about both of those operations because they had been significant battles that resulted in heavy casualties on both sides and required exceptional skill and courage from the human forces involved. Those were serious combat situations that cost many lives, so if you were really there, you should be able to provide details about what happened, Martinez said. During the New Colorado operation, my unit was responsible for gathering intelligence on Zephyrian tactics while engaging them directly in close combat, using unconventional techniques that proved highly effective. Blake replied. What kind of unconventional techniques? Martinez pressed. Techniques that combined precision timing with environmental awareness and creative use of available resources rather than relying solely on standard military procedures, Blake said. Martinez was growing frustrated because Blake's answers sounded like she was describing choreographed fight scenes rather than real military combat against deadly alien enemies. Ms. Blake, your descriptions sound more like you are talking about movie stunts than actual warfare against creatures that can kill trained soldiers with their bare hands, Martinez said impatiently. I understand why it might sound that way, sir, but the skills I developed in entertainment work translated directly to combat effectiveness in ways that surprised everyone, including myself, Blake replied without showing any sign of being offended by his criticism. I have seen enough entertainment industry people try to join the military and they never understand the difference between performing fake violence and surviving real violence, Martinez said. You are absolutely right that there is a huge difference, and I learned that distinction through direct experience in combat zones, where mistakes meant death, not just ruined takes, Blake said. Martinez decided that he had heard enough because Blake's explanations were too vague, and her claims about combining entertainment skills with military combat seemed completely unrealistic. This interview is over, and my original assessment stands that entertainment industry experience does not qualify someone for the Xenocombat division, Martinez announced. Thank you for your time, sir, and I hope you will reconsider if additional information becomes available, Blake said, before the holographic display went dark. Martinez turned to Kevin and shook his head because the interview had only confirmed his original opinion that Lisa Blake was not suitable for elite military service, regardless of what high command might think. Colonel Martinez spent the rest of that day thinking about Lisa Blake's interview and becoming more convinced that she was exactly the kind of unqualified candidate who would get good soldiers killed if she was allowed to join the Xenocombat division without proper evaluation of her actual abilities. The next morning, Martinez walked into his office with a plan that would prove once and for all that entertainment industry people had no business fighting real aliens in real combat situations, where lives depended on training and experience rather than acting skills. Kevin, I want you to set up a combat simulation for Lisa Blake using the Kepler station scenario, Martinez announced as he sat down at his desk. Lieutenant Kevin Ross looked up from his morning reports with surprise because the Kepler station simulation was notorious for being nearly impossible to complete successfully, even for experienced Xenocombat veterans. Sir, that simulation has a failure rate of over 90%, and most candidates who attempt it end up requesting transfer to safer units, Kevin pointed out. Exactly, which makes it perfect for demonstrating why we cannot lower our standards just because high command is pressuring us to accept unqualified candidates, Martinez replied. The Kepler station scenario was based on a real battle that had taken place 6 months earlier, when an entire battalion of human soldiers had been trapped in a research facility while Zephyrian shock troops attacked from multiple directions with overwhelming force. Are you sure you want to use that particular simulation, sir, because it might be considered unfair to test a candidate with something that difficult? Kevin asked carefully. There is nothing unfair about testing whether someone can handle the kind of situations they will face in actual combat against alien forces, Martinez said firmly. But sir, most of our current xenocombat soldiers cannot complete that simulation successfully, and they have years of real combat experience, Kevin reminded him. Martinez stood up and walked over to the window that showed the training deck where soldiers practiced combat techniques against holographic alien enemies that moved and fought like the real thing. That is exactly my point, Kevin. If our best soldiers cannot handle the Kepler station scenario, then someone with entertainment industry background certainly cannot handle it either, Martinez explained. What if she actually manages to complete the simulation successfully? Kevin asked. She will not complete it successfully because entertainment people do not have the training or experience necessary to survive against simulated Zephyrian warriors, Martinez replied confidently. Should I invite other officers to observe the simulation? Kevin suggested. Martinez smiled because having witnesses would make Blake's failure even more convincing proof that his original assessment had been correct about her lack of qualifications. Yes, invite Captain Amy Foster and Major Greg Collins and anyone else who thinks we should be recruiting people from the entertainment industry, Martinez ordered. Kevin began making arrangements for the simulation, while Martinez reviewed the technical specifications of the Kepler station scenario to make sure it would provide an accurate test of Blake's abilities. The scenario involved defending a research facility against waves of Zephyrian shock troops who were armed with plasma weapons and had superior physical capabilities compared to human soldiers. Candidates were given standard military equipment including body armor and weapons, but had to rely on their training and tactical knowledge to survive against enemies who were faster, stronger, and more aggressive than regular human opponents. The simulation is scheduled for tomorrow morning, and I have contacted the other officers who will observe from the control room, Kevin reported. Perfect, and make sure Blake understands that this is a standard evaluation that all xenocombat candidates must pass before being accepted into the unit, Martinez said. The next morning, Lisa Blake arrived at the training facility wearing standard military fatigues and carrying herself with the confident posture of someone who was not intimidated by the challenge ahead. Martinez watched from the control room as Blake entered the simulation chamber and began examining the equipment that had been provided for the test captain Amy. Foster and Major Greg Collins stood beside Martinez along with several other officers who were curious to see how someone with entertainment background would perform against the most difficult combat simulation in the military. This should be interesting, Captain Foster commented as she watched Blake checking her weapons and armor. Interesting is one word for it, Martinez replied as he activated the simulation program. The virtual reality system created a perfect replica of the Kepler station research facility, complete with narrow corridors, laboratory equipment, and multiple entry points where enemy forces could attack. Blake moved through the facility carefully and appeared to be studying the layout while preparing for the first wave of Zephyrian attackers who would appear within minutes. She seems to know what she is doing, Major Collins observed as he watched Blake's methodical preparation. Anyone can look professional for the first few minutes, but wait until the aliens start shooting at her, Martinez replied. The simulation began with 3 Zephyrian shock troops materializing in the main corridor and immediately opening fire with plasma weapons that could cut through metal and human flesh with equal ease. Blake dove behind a laboratory table as plasma bolts flew past her head and began returning fire with her standard military rifle, while calling out tactical information as if she were coordinating with a team. Her movement looks pretty smooth for someone who supposedly learned combat from movies, Captain Foster noted. Beginner's luck and basic training from the Colonial Defense Forces, Martinez dismissed. The first wave of enemies was relatively easy compared to what would come later, but Blake handled them with efficiency that suggested more experience than Martinez had expected. Blake eliminated all 3 aliens without taking any damage, and immediately began preparing defensive positions for the next wave, which would include more enemies with better weapons. That was actually quite impressive, Major Collins said as he watched Blake setting up improvised barriers and checking her ammunition. Wait until the real challenge begins, Martinez replied as he increased the difficulty level for the next wave. 6 Zephyrian warriors appeared from different directions and began coordinating their attack in a way that had overwhelmed most previous candidates. Within seconds, Blake responded by using the laboratory equipment in ways that Martinez had never seen before, creating distractions and traps that confused the enemy soldiers. "What is she doing with that chemical equipment?" Captain Foster asked as she watched Blake manipulating laboratory devices. "I have no idea, but it looks like she is trying to create some kind of improvised weapon," Major Collins replied. Blake triggered a chemical reaction that created a dense smoke cloud and then moved through it like she could see perfectly while the alien enemies struggled to track her location. "That is definitely not standard military doctrine," Martinez admitted as he watched Blake eliminate 2 more enemies using tactics that seemed part science experiment and part combat technique. "Maybe that is why it is working so well," Captain Foster suggested. The simulation continued with increasing waves of enemy forces, but Blake adapted to each new challenge with creative solutions that combined knowledge of chemistry, physics, and engineering with combat skills. "Where did she learn to use laboratory equipment as weapons?" Major Collins asked. "Probably from some science fiction movie," Martinez replied, but his tone was less confident than before. Blake was not just surviving the simulation but actually achieving objectives that most candidates never even attempted because they were too busy trying to stay alive against overwhelming enemy forces. She just secured the research data that was supposed to be impossible to reach during combat, Captain Foster pointed out. Martinez watched in growing amazement as Blake continued to outperform his expectations while using techniques that were completely unlike anything taught in standard military training. The final wave of the simulation included a Zephyrian commander who was twice as large and 3 times as dangerous as regular shock troops and carried weapons that could destroy the entire facility. Blake faced this ultimate challenge by luring the commander into a trap she had constructed using the facility's power systems and emergency equipment in ways that required both technical knowledge and perfect timing. "I have never seen anyone complete the Kepler station scenario that efficiently," Major Collins said, as Blake eliminated the final enemy. "Most of our best soldiers cannot finish that simulation without taking serious damage, but she made it look almost easy." Captain Foster added. Martinez stared at the simulation results that showed Blake had not only completed the scenario successfully, but had achieved a score higher than any previous candidate in the history of the program. "This does not make sense," Martinez muttered as he reviewed the data. "What does not make sense, sir?" Kevin asked. "Someone with entertainment industry background should not be able to perform like that against military-grade combat simulation," Martinez replied. Blake emerged from the simulation chamber looking tired but not defeated, and walked over to the control room where the officers were still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. "How did you do that?" Martinez asked directly. "Do what, sir?" Blake replied. Lisa Blake stood in the center of the combat simulation chamber, while the virtual reality system created a perfect replica of Kepler station around her, with metal walls, laboratory equipment, and the smell of recycled air that made the experience feel completely real. The chamber was equipped with haptic feedback systems that would make her feel the impact of enemy weapons and the weight of her equipment, while holographic projectors created visual representations of Zephyrian warriors that moved and fought exactly like the real aliens. Colonel Martinez watched from the control room above the simulation chamber and felt confident that this test would finally prove that entertainment industry people had no business in real military combat situations. "Beginning simulation in 30 seconds, the computer voice announced as Blake finished checking her standard military rifle and body armor. Blake moved through the simulated research facility with careful steps while examining the layout and noting potential defensive positions that could be used when the alien enemies started their attack. "She looks nervous," Captain Amy Foster observed from the control room as she watched Blake's cautious movements. "Anyone would be nervous facing the Kepler station scenario for the first time," Major Greg Collins replied. Martinez adjusted the difficulty settings to make sure the simulation would provide an accurate representation of the overwhelming force that had nearly destroyed an entire human battalion in the real battle. "Simulation beginning now," the computer announced as 3 Zephyrian shock troops materialized in the main corridor, armed with plasma weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Blake immediately dropped behind a laboratory workbench as the aliens opened fire with plasma bolts that scorched the air, where she had been standing just seconds before. The plasma weapons made a distinctive humming sound, followed by explosive impacts when they hit walls or equipment, and Blake had to move constantly to avoid being caught in a crossfire. "First wave is always the easiest part," Martinez commented as he watched Blake return fire with precise shots that hit 2 of the alien warriors. Blake moved from cover to cover with fluid motions that looked almost like she was dancing, except for the deadly serious expression on her face as she tracked enemy positions. Her movement patterns are unusual, but effective, Major Collins noted as Blake eliminated the 3rd alien with a shot that required perfect timing and accuracy. "Basic marksmanship skills that anyone can learn in boot camp," Martinez replied dismissively. Blake used the brief pause between waves to examine the laboratory equipment more carefully and began moving chemical containers and electronic devices into new positions around the facility. "What is she doing with that equipment?" Captain Foster asked as she watched Blake connecting wires and adjusting chemical mixing apparatus, probably trying to build some kind of movie prop gadget that will not work in real combat. Martinez said. The second wave began with 6 Zephyrian warriors attacking from multiple directions while using coordinated tactics that had overwhelmed most previous simulation candidates within the first few minutes. Blake triggered something she had built using the laboratory equipment, and suddenly the entire facility filled with dense white smoke that blocked visual contact between her and the enemy forces. "Smoke grenades are standard military equipment, but I did not see her carry any into the simulation," Major Collins observed. "She must have improvised that smokescreen using chemicals from the laboratory," Captain Foster realized. Blake moved through the smoke cloud like she could see perfectly, while the alien enemies stumbled around trying to locate her position and firing plasma weapons in random directions. "That is definitely not a technique taught in standard military training," Martinez admitted as he watched Blake eliminate 3 more aliens using tactics that seemed impossible. Blake appeared behind one of the remaining aliens and attacked with hand-to-hand combat moves that were faster and more precise than anything Martinez had seen from regular military personnel. "Where did she learn close-quarters combat like that?" Captain Foster asked as Blake disabled another enemy without using her weapon. "Entertainment industry fight. Choreography probably taught her some flashy moves that happened to work against simulated enemies," Martinez suggested, but his tone was less certain than before. The 3rd wave included 9 Zephyrian warriors with better armor and more powerful weapons, plus environmental hazards that made the simulation even more deadly. Blake responded by using the facility's power systems to create electrical traps while simultaneously fighting multiple enemies with a combination of ranged and close combat techniques. "She is using the environment like it is part of her arsenal rather than just an obstacle to work around," Major Collins observed. Blake redirected power from non-essential systems to overload lighting fixtures and create electrical barriers that channeled enemy movement into killing zones she had prepared in advance. "I have never seen anyone use facility infrastructure as a weapon like that," Captain Foster said with obvious admiration. "It requires technical knowledge that goes beyond basic military training." Major Collins added. Martinez watched Blake continue to outperform his expectations, while using creative solutions that seemed to come from a completely different approach to combat than anything taught in military academies. Blake eliminated the remaining enemies from the 3rd wave and immediately began preparing for the final challenge, which would include a Zephyrian commander with enough firepower to level the entire facility. Most candidates give up before reaching the final wave, because it is designed to be nearly impossible, Martinez explained. "She does not look like someone who is planning to give up," Captain Foster replied. The final wave began with the Zephyrian commander materializing in the center of the facility, while carrying weapons that could punch through military-grade armor and destroy reinforced walls. Blake had used the time between waves to construct an elaborate trap using the facility's emergency systems power grid and chemical processing equipment in ways that transformed the entire laboratory into a weapon. "That is the most complex improvised device I have ever seen built during a combat simulation," Major Collins said as he watched Blake's preparation. The Zephyrian commander was 3 times larger than regular alien warriors and moved with deadly grace while tracking Blake's position and firing weapons that turned laboratory equipment into twisted metal. Blake led the commander through a carefully planned route that activated different components of her improvised trap system while avoiding the aliens' devastating attacks. She is using the commander's own aggression against him, Captain Foster observed. As Blake triggered the first part of her trap, Blake timed her movements perfectly to activate each component of the trap at exactly the right moment, while staying just ahead of the commander's weapons fire. The final activation sent massive electrical discharge through the facility's metal framework, while simultaneously triggering chemical reactions that created explosive force concentrated on the commander's position. The simulation computer is registering complete elimination of all enemy forces. Lieutenant Kevin Ross announced from his monitoring station. Blake emerged from the simulation chamber looking tired but alert, while the virtual reality system powered down and returned the room to its normal appearance. Final score is the highest ever recorded for the Kepler station scenario, Kevin reported as he read the results from his computer screen. Martinez stared at the numbers that showed Blake had not only survived the simulation, but had achieved objectives that most experienced soldiers never even attempted. How is that possible? Martinez asked quietly. Sir, the computer systems recorded everything, and the data shows that her techniques were both highly effective and completely original. Kevin explained. Blake walked over to the control room where the officers were still trying to process what they had just witnessed. That was an interesting challenge, Blake said calmly, as if she had just completed a routine training exercise rather than the most difficult combat simulation in the military. Interesting is not the word I would use, Martinez replied as he reviewed the detailed performance analysis. How did you know to use the laboratory equipment like that? Captain Foster asked. The equipment was available, and the tactical situation required creative solutions, so I used what was there. Blake explained simply. Those techniques are not taught in any military manual. Major Collins pointed out, You are correct, sir. They are not standard military techniques. Blake agreed. Martinez realized that his assumptions about Lisa Blake had been completely wrong, and that she possessed combat abilities that went far beyond anything he had expected from someone with entertainment industry background. Colonel Martinez sat behind his desk in stunned silence, while trying to process what he had just witnessed in the combat simulation chamber, because Lisa Blake had performed better than any candidate in the history of the Xeno Combat Division testing program. I need answers, and I need them now, Martinez said as he looked directly at Blake, who stood at attention in front of his desk, with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the entire simulation. What specific information would you like, sir? Blake replied in a respectful tone that showed no sign of pride or arrogance despite her exceptional performance. I want to know where you really learned those combat techniques, because what I saw in that simulation chamber was not the result of basic military training or entertainment industry experience. Martinez demanded. Blake remained silent for several seconds, as if she were considering how much information she could reveal without violating security protocols or classified operation guidelines. My entertainment industry work was not conventional, sir, and involved situations that required real combat skills rather than simulated performance for cameras, Blake finally explained. That is not a sufficient answer, Martinez replied firmly. I understand your frustration, sir, but the details of my previous work are classified at levels that require special clearance to discuss, Blake said. Lieutenant Kevin Ross entered the office carrying a computer tablet with additional information about Blake's background that had been retrieved from classified military databases. Sir, I have been researching Ms. Blake's service record, and there are some unusual aspects to her military file that might explain her performance, Kevin reported. What kind of unusual aspects? Martinez asked as he took the tablet and began reading through the new information. Her assignments were not with regular colonial defense forces, but with specialized units that operated under different command structures and mission parameters. Kevin explained. Martinez read through the classified portions of Blake's file and discovered that she had been assigned to something called Project Trojan Horse, which was listed as a joint operation between military intelligence and media production companies. What exactly is Project Trojan Horse? Martinez asked Blake directly. A classified program that used entertainment industry cover stories to conduct military operations in contested territories. Blake replied carefully. Are you telling me that you were making movies while fighting real battles? Martinez said with disbelief. The movie productions were covers for intelligence gathering and combat operations against alien forces in areas where regular military presence would have been detected. Blake explained. Captain Amy Foster and Major Greg Collins had remained in the office after the simulation and were listening to this conversation with growing amazement at the revelations about Blake's true background. How many entertainment industry people were involved in this program? Captain Foster asked. Very few, sir, because it required individuals with both artistic skills and combat capabilities, which is an unusual combination. Blake replied. Martinez continued reading through the classified files and found references to 17 major combat engagements that had been conducted under the cover of film production in various star systems. These battle reports show significant casualties among alien forces, but I have never heard of any of these operations, Martinez said. The program was designed to operate without public knowledge or official recognition to maintain operational security, Blake explained. So while everyone thought you were making action movies, you were actually fighting real aliens. Major Collins summarized. The movie productions were real, but they served as cover for military objectives that could not be accomplished through conventional operations. Blake confirmed Martinez found video files attached to Blake's service record and opened one that showed what appeared to be a typical action movie scene with explosions and combat between humans and aliens. This looks like standard entertainment industry footage, Martinez observed as he watched the video. Look more carefully at the weapons fire and the alien movements, sir, Blake suggested. Martinez replayed the video and began to notice details that seemed different from typical movie special effects, including the way plasma weapons created real heat distortion and how alien movements appeared genuinely aggressive rather than choreographed. Are you saying this is real combat footage disguised as entertainment? Martinez asked. Yes, sir. The footage you are watching shows actual engagements with Zephyrian forces during the defense of New Colorado, Blake confirmed. But this was released as a commercial movie that millions of people watched in theaters. Captain Foster pointed out, the best way to hide real military operations is to present them as fiction, so that anyone who sees them will assume they are watching entertainment, rather than classified combat footage. Blake explained. Martinez opened another video file that showed Blake herself engaged in close-quarters combat with multiple alien enemies using the same techniques she had demonstrated in the simulation chamber. This is definitely not acting, Martinez said as he watched Blake eliminate 3 Zephyrian warriors, with moves that were clearly designed to kill rather than impress an audience. No, sir, it was not acting. Although it required many of the same skills, including timing, precision, and awareness of camera angles for documentation purposes, Blake replied. Documentation purposes? Major Collins asked. All operations were recorded for intelligence analysis and tactical development, even though the footage was later edited for public release as entertainment, Blake explained. Martinez reviewed more of the classified files and found detailed after-action reports that described Blake's performance in combat situations that were even more dangerous than the simulation she had just completed. According to these reports, you eliminated 47 alien enemies during a single engagement and suffered only minor injuries, Martinez read from the file. The entertainment industry training in choreography and spatial awareness translated well to combat situations that required multiple opponents to be engaged simultaneously, Blake said. Multiple opponents meaning you were fighting several aliens at the same time. Captain Foster clarified. Yes, ma'am. The nature of our operations often required small teams to engage larger enemy forces while maintaining cover identities and completing documentation objectives. Blake replied. Martinez closed the tablet and looked at Blake with a completely different understanding of her qualifications and background than he had possessed just 1 hour earlier. Why? Was this program shut down? Martinez asked. It was not shut down, sir, but transitioned to different operational parameters after achieving its primary objectives in the outer colonies, Blake replied. And now you want to join the Xenocombat Division, using skills that were developed in one of the most classified programs in military history, Martinez summarized. Yes, sir, because those skills are directly applicable to the mission requirements of elite combat units fighting alien forces, Blake. Confirmed. Lieutenant Kevin Ross had been quietly reading through additional classified documents and looked up with an expression of amazement. Sir, there are references here to techniques that Blake developed being incorporated into training programs for Special Operations Forces, Kevin reported. What kind of techniques? Martinez asked. Combat methods that combine entertainment industry skills with military tactics to create approaches that are more effective against alien enemies than conventional warfare. Kevin read from the documents. Martinez realized that he had not only misjudged Lisa Blake, but had nearly rejected someone whose expertise could significantly improve the effectiveness of the entire Xenocombat Division, Ms. Blake. I owe you an apology for my initial assessment of your qualifications, Martinez said formally. No apology necessary, sir, because my background does appear unusual without knowledge of the classified aspects. Blake replied, I think we need to discuss how your experience might benefit our current operations against Zephyrian forces, Martinez continued. I would be honored to contribute to the mission, sir, Blake said. Colonel Martinez spent the next several hours reading through every classified document related to Project Trojan Horse, while trying to understand how an entire military program had operated without his knowledge, despite his high security clearance and years of experience fighting alien forces. The more he read about the program, the more he realized that Lisa Blake represented something completely unprecedented in military history, because she had been trained to use entertainment industry skills as actual weapons against enemy forces in real combat situations. Kevin, I need you to contact Admiral Stone and request a full briefing on Project Trojan Horse, because there are aspects of this program that affect our current operations, Martinez ordered. Lieutenant Kevin Ross nodded and began making the secure communication arrangements while Martinez continued reviewing combat footage that showed Blake and other program participants engaging Zephyrian forces using techniques that seemed impossible but were clearly effective. The classified files contained detailed analysis of how entertainment industry training in choreography, timing, and spatial awareness could be adapted for military use against alien enemies who fought differently than human opponents. Sir Admiral Stone is available for secure communication, Kevin reported. Martinez activated the holographic display and saw Admiral Stone's image appear with the serious expression she always wore when discussing classified military operations. Frank, I understand you have questions about Project Trojan Horse, Admiral Stone said without waiting for Martinez to speak. Admiral, I need to understand why I was not informed about a program that developed combat techniques that could revolutionize how we fight alien forces, Martinez replied. The program was compartmentalized to protect operational security, and only personnel with direct involvement were given access to the full details. Stone explained, but some of these techniques could be adapted for use by the Xenocombat Division if we understood how they work, Martinez pointed out. That is exactly why Lisa Blake was recommended for your unit, because she has the knowledge and experience necessary to train other soldiers in these methods, Stone said. Martinez looked at the combat footage again and tried to imagine how regular military personnel could learn to fight like Blake had demonstrated in the simulation chamber. Admiral, how many other people were involved in this program, and are they available for recruitment? Martinez asked. Blake is one of only 12 individuals who completed the full training program, and she is the only one currently available for reassignment to active combat units, Stone replied. What happened to the other 11 participants? Martinez asked. 3 were killed in action during classified operations, 2 were reassigned to intelligence positions, and 6 are involved in ongoing missions that cannot be discussed, Stone explained. Martinez realized that Lisa Blake might be his only opportunity to learn techniques that could give the Xenocombat Division significant advantages against Zephyrian forces. Admiral, the Furrow, I would like to formally request that Blake be assigned to my unit immediately, Martinez said. Request approved. but I want you to understand that her knowledge represents years of classified research and development that cannot be shared with unauthorized personnel. Stone warned. Understand the security implications, but I also understand that we are losing too many soldiers because our current tactics are not effective enough against alien forces. Martinez replied. Admiral Stone nodded, because she knew that Martinez was right about the casualty rates and the need for new approaches to combat against technologically superior enemies. Blake will be transferred to your command within 24 hours, along with training materials that will help you understand how to implement her techniques, Stone said. What kind of training materials? Martinez asked. Video documentation of successful operations, along with tactical analysis and step-by-step instruction guides for adapting entertainment industry skills to military applications, Stone explained. After the communication ended, Martinez sat quietly while considering the implications of having someone like Blake in his unit and wondering how other soldiers would react to learning combat techniques from someone with entertainment industry background. Sir, what are your plans for integrating Blake into the existing Xenocombat division structure? Kevin asked. I am not sure yet because her skills are so different from conventional military training that we may need to redesign our entire approach to combat operations. Martinez replied. Martinez activated his computer terminal and began reviewing the personnel files of current Xenocombat division members to determine which soldiers might be most suitable for learning Blake's unconventional techniques. The unit consisted of 48 elite soldiers who had survived multiple engagements with alien forces and demonstrated exceptional skill in conventional military tactics, but none of them had experience with entertainment industry methods. Kevin, I want you to set up training sessions where Blake can demonstrate her techniques to small groups of our best soldiers, Martinez ordered. Should I inform the soldiers about Blake's background with Project Trojan Horse? Kevin asked. Not yet, because that information is still classified, but I want them to see what she can do before they learn about her unusual training, Martinez replied. Martinez knew that most soldiers would be skeptical about learning combat techniques from someone with entertainment industry background, unless they first witnessed the effectiveness of those techniques firsthand. The classified files included detailed psychological profiles of Project Trojan Horse participants that showed how entertainment industry training affected their approach to combat stress and tactical decision-making. According to these reports, entertainment industry people adapt to combat situations differently than regular military personnel because they are trained to perform under pressure while maintaining awareness of multiple variables simultaneously. Martinez read aloud. That sounds like it could be useful for complex combat situations against alien forces. Kevin observed Martinez continued reading and found that entertainment industry training also provided advantages in improvisation creativity and using environmental resources in unexpected ways. Blake's performance in the simulation makes more sense now because she was trained to see the environment as part of her performance space, rather than just background terrain, Martinez realized. The psychological analysis explained that entertainment industry people were comfortable with rapid role changes and adapting their behavior to different situations, which translated well to the unpredictable nature of alien combat. Sir, there is a note here about entertainment industry, people having enhanced ability to read body language and predict opponent movements. Kevin pointed out. That would explain how Blake was able to anticipate the alien movements in the simulation so effectively, Martinez said. Martinez found technical documentation that described specific techniques for converting entertainment industry skills into combat applications, including methods for timing attacks using choreography principles. This is fascinating, but I still do not understand how movie fight scenes translate to real combat effectiveness, Martinez admitted. Maybe we will understand better after watching Blake train with our soldiers, Kevin suggested. Martinez spent the rest of the day reviewing Project Trojan Horse materials and preparing for Blake's arrival while trying to imagine how his conventional military unit would adapt to learning techniques that had been developed in Hollywood studios. The training materials included video examples of other Project Trojan Horse participants, demonstrating combat techniques that looked like elaborate dance routines but were actually deadly effective against alien enemies. These techniques require a level of physical coordination and spatial awareness that most soldiers do not possess, Martinez observed as he watched the training. Videos. Blake will probably need to start with basic movement and timing exercises before advancing to actual combat applications, Kevin suggested. Martinez realized that integrating Blake into the Xeno Combat Division would require more than just adding another soldier to the unit, because her knowledge represented a completely different philosophy of combat that could change how they approached every mission. Kevin, I want you to clear the main training facility for exclusive use by Blake and selected volunteers from our unit, Martinez ordered. How many volunteers, sir? Kevin asked. Start with 5 of our best soldiers and see how they respond to Blake's training methods. Martinez replied. Martinez knew that the success or failure of this experiment would determine whether entertainment industry combat techniques could be scaled up for use by regular military forces fighting the war against alien invaders. Admiral Patricia Stone arrived aboard the UES Defiance the following morning, carrying a secure data storage device that contained classified combat footage from Project Trojan Horse operations that had never been seen by anyone outside the program colonel. Martinez met Admiral Stone in the secure briefing room, where she connected the storage device to the holographic display system, while explaining that the footage he was about to see would change his understanding of modern warfare. Frank, what you are about to watch represents the most successful anti-alien combat operations in military history, but these engagements were never officially acknowledged because of their classified nature, Stone said as she activated the display. The first video showed what appeared to be a typical action movie set with cameras, crew members, and actors in costume. But Martinez quickly realized that something was different about this production. Watch carefully, because nothing you see here is fake or staged, Stone instructed as the footage began showing human actors engaging alien enemies with weapons that produced real explosions and actual casualties. Martinez watched in amazement as Lisa Blake appeared on screen, moving through a battle zone with fluid grace while eliminating Zephyrian warriors using techniques that looked like elaborate choreography, but were clearly lethal combat moves. This footage was taken during the Battle of Titan 7, where Blake's team eliminated an entire alien command post while maintaining their cover as a movie production crew, Stone explained. The video showed Blake using the terrain and available equipment in ways that seemed impossible as she led a small team of disguised soldiers through complex tactical maneuvers that resulted in complete victory against overwhelming enemy forces. How many alien enemies were eliminated during this operation? Martinez asked as he watched Blake coordinate attacks that looked like carefully rehearsed dance sequences. 43 confirmed kills with 0 human casualties, Stone replied. Martinez paused the video and studied Blake's movements more carefully while trying to understand how someone could fight so effectively while making it appear like entertainment rather than real warfare. The key to understanding these techniques is recognizing that entertainment industry training provides skills that are directly applicable to combat situations requiring precision timing and spatial awareness, Stone explained. The next video showed Blake engaged in single combat against a Zephyrian commander who was twice her size and armed with weapons that could destroy armored vehicles. With single shots, Martinez watched Blake use what appeared to be dance moves to avoid the aliens' attacks while simultaneously positioning herself for counterattacks that exploited weaknesses in the enemy's armor and fighting style. That Zephyrian commander had killed 17 human soldiers in previous engagements, but Blake eliminated him using techniques that made the fight look like a choreographed performance, Stone said. How is that possible? Martinez asked as he watched the footage again. Entertainment industry training teaches people to move with perfect timing while maintaining awareness of multiple variables, including camera angles, lighting, and the movements of other performers, Stone explained. Martinez began to understand that Blake's entertainment background had provided her with skills that were uniquely suited to the complex challenges of fighting alien enemies who moved and fought differently than human opponents. The third video showed Blake's team conducting a rescue operation in an alien-occupied facility, where they had to eliminate guards, free prisoners, and escape without triggering alarms that would bring reinforcements. This operation was conducted under the cover of filming an action sequence for a major movie production, and the entire rescue was completed without the aliens realizing they were under attack. Stone said. Martinez watched Blake move through the facility like she was performing a carefully rehearsed routine, while actually conducting a military operation that required split-second timing and perfect coordination with her team. The aliens thought they were watching humans create entertainment rather than conducting a military assault. Stone continued. But how did Blake know exactly where to move and when to attack? Martinez asked. Entertainment industry professionals are trained to hit precise marks at exact moments while maintaining awareness of everything happening around them. Stone replied. The footage showed Blake eliminating alien guards with moves that looked like elaborate fight choreography but were actually lethal combat techniques adapted from entertainment industry training. These are not standard military tactics, Martinez observed. You are correct, but they are more effective against alien enemies than conventional warfare because aliens do not understand human entertainment and cannot predict movements that appear to be artistic rather than tactical. Stone explained. Martinez watched several more videos that showed different Project Trojan Horse operations where entertainment industry cover stories had allowed human forces to achieve objectives that would have been impossible using conventional military approaches. Blake and her team were able to gather intelligence, conduct rescues, and eliminate high-value targets because the aliens never suspected that movie productions could be cover for military operations. Stone said, the final video showed Blake training other Project Trojan Horse participants in techniques that combined entertainment industry skills with military applications while demonstrating how choreography could be weaponized for use against alien forces. This training footage shows how entertainment industry methods can be taught to military personnel with the right background and aptitude. Stone explained. Martinez watched Blake teaching soldiers to move with the precise timing and spatial awareness that entertainment professionals used while performing complex scenes with multiple actors under the air. Key insight is that entertainment industry training provides skills that are directly applicable to combat situations where traditional military tactics are not effective. Stone said, but how many soldiers have the physical coordination and mental flexibility required to learn these techniques? Martinez asked. According to our research, approximately 20% of military personnel can adapt to these methods with proper training. Stone replied. Martinez realized that Blake's knowledge could potentially transform the effectiveness of the entire Xenocombat division if her techniques could be successfully taught to other soldiers. Admiral Y want to implement a full training program based on Blake's methods, Martinez said. That is exactly what High Command hoped you would decide after seeing this footage. Stone replied. How soon can we begin training operations? Martinez asked. Blake is prepared to start immediately, and we have additional instructional materials that will support the training program. Stone said. Martinez studied the tactical analysis reports that accompanied the combat footage and found detailed explanations of how entertainment industry skills translated to specific military advantages against alien forces. These reports show significant improvements in soldier survival rates and mission success percentages when entertainment industry techniques are properly implemented. Martinez noted. The data is conclusive that these methods provide substantial tactical advantages, but they require commanders who understand how to integrate unconventional approaches with traditional military operations. Stone explained. Martinez closed the tactical reports and looked at Admiral Stone with complete conviction that Lisa Blake represented the most important addition to his unit since the Xenocombat division had been created. Admiral, the Farn formally request permission to redesign our entire training program around Blake's techniques. Martinez said, permission granted, and High Command will provide whatever resources you need to make this program successful. Stone replied. Martinez knew that he was about to transform the Xenocombat division from a conventional military unit into something completely new that combined the best aspects of entertainment industry training with elite military combat capabilities. Colonel Martinez stood in his office 3 weeks later, watching real-time combat footage from Operation Starburst where Lisa Blake was leading a squad of newly trained Xeno Combat Division soldiers against a heavily fortified Zephyrian stronghold that had resisted conventional military attacks for 6 months. The mission had seemed impossible when High Command first assigned it, because the alien fortress contained advanced defensive systems and was protected by elite Zephyrian warriors, who had never been defeated in direct combat. Blake's team moved through the enemy territory with fluid coordination that looked like a carefully choreographed performance, but was actually the deadliest military operation Martinez had ever witnessed. Target, sight and visual range beginning final approach. Blake's voice came through the communication system as her team reached the outer perimeter of the alien stronghold. Martinez watched the tactical display that showed Blake's soldiers moving in perfect synchronization while avoiding detection by enemy sensors that should have spotted them immediately. How are they staying invisible to the alien surveillance systems? Lieutenant Kevin Ross asked as he monitored the mission from the command center. Blake taught them to move with timing and spacing that confuses alien perception because the movements appear random rather than tactical, Martinez explained. The first phase of the assault began when Blake's team eliminated perimeter guards using techniques that made the attacks look like accidents rather than coordinated military strikes. Guard Post 7 is down and the aliens think it was equipment malfunction. One of Blake's soldiers reported Martinez had spent weeks learning to appreciate how entertainment industry training allowed soldiers to make lethal attacks appear completely innocent until it was too late for enemies to respond effectively. Blake led her team deeper into the stronghold while using environmental features in ways that transformed the alien fortress into a weapon against its own defenders. She is turning their own defensive systems against them, Captain Amy Foster observed as she watched Blake redirect energy conduits to create electrical traps. The aliens began to realize they were under attack, but could not identify the source of the threat because Blake's team moved like they were performing rather than fighting. Enemy forces are confused and disorganized because they cannot predict our movement patterns, Blake reported as her team eliminated another group of defenders. Martinez watched Blake demonstrate the same creative problem-solving she had shown in the combat simulation, except now she was using real alien equipment and facing genuine life-or-death situations. Blake's team has reached the command center, Kevin announced as the tactical display showed the soldiers entering the most heavily defended area of the stronghold. The final assault required Blake to eliminate a Zephyrian war chief who commanded the entire fortress, while her team secured critical intelligence data that would help human forces plan future operations. Martinez watched Blake engage the alien commander in single combat, using techniques that combined entertainment industry choreography with deadly military efficiency. Target eliminated and intelligence data secured, Blake announced after defeating the war chief with moves that looked like elaborate dance steps, but were actually lethal combat techniques. All objectives completed with 0 casualties, Blake's second-in-command reported as the team prepared to evacuate the captured stronghold. Martinez felt pride and amazement as he realized that Blake had accomplished something that conventional military forces had considered impossible. Colonel, the mission success rate for operations using Blake's techniques is now 97%, compared to 62% for conventional tactics. Kevin reported. Martinez had been forced to completely change his understanding of military effectiveness and accept that entertainment industry training could produce superior combat results against alien enemies. Blake's methods are being requested by special operations commanders throughout the fleet, Captain Foster added as she reviewed mission reports from other units. How many soldiers have successfully completed training in these techniques? Martinez asked. 43 from our unit and another 112 from other divisions, Kevin replied. Martinez realized that Lisa Blake had transformed not just the Xenocombat division, but the entire approach to fighting alien forces across the human military. Sir Blake is requesting permission to establish a permanent training facility for entertainment industry combat techniques, Kevin said. Permission granted, and tell her she has whatever resources she needs, Martinez replied immediately. Martinez walked over to the window that showed the training deck where soldiers were practicing Blake's techniques under her direct supervision. The movements looked like elaborate performances, but Martinez now understood that every gesture and step was designed to create tactical advantages against alien enemies who could not predict or Counter-entertainment industry combat methods. Blake has revolutionized how we fight this war, Martinez said to himself as he watched the training session. Lieutenant Kevin Ross entered the office carrying Blake's latest training report, which showed continued improvements in soldier performance and mission success rates. Sir Blake is recommending that entertainment industry recruitment be expanded to include other creative professionals who might have skills applicable to military operations, Kevin reported. What kind of creative professionals? Martinez asked. Musicians for improved timing and rhythm dancers for enhanced coordination, and visual artists for better spatial awareness. Kevin read from the report. Martinez considered the possibility that Blake's success might be just the beginning of a larger transformation in how humans approached warfare against technologically superior alien forces. The war is changing, and we need to change with it, Martinez realized as he approved Blake's recommendations. 3 months later, Martinez received a personal commendation from High Command for developing the most effective anti-alien combat program in military history. Blake had been promoted to major and placed in charge of the new entertainment industry combat training division, which was producing elite soldiers whose skills exceeded anything previously achieved through conventional military methods. Sir, we have requests from 12 different star systems for Blake's trained soldiers, because they are the only human forces capable of defeating Zephyrian elite units, Kevin reported. Martinez looked at Blake's original application file, which he had kept on his desk as a reminder never to judge candidates based on their background, rather than their actual capabilities. I almost rejected the most valuable soldier in the human fleet, because I thought entertainment industry experience was worthless, Martinez admitted. The important thing is that you recognized your mistake and gave her the opportunity to prove her worth, Kevin replied. Martinez knew that Blake's success had taught him and the entire military establishment that human strength came from diversity and creativity rather than rigid adherence to traditional methods. Blake proved that our assumptions about military effectiveness were wrong and that unconventional approaches can produce superior results, Martinez said. The final mission report showed that Blake's techniques had reduced human casualties by 73% while increasing mission success rates across all theaters of the war against alien forces. Martinez watched Blake training another group of soldiers and felt grateful that High Command had forced him to reconsider his original assessment of her qualifications. She has saved thousands of lives by showing us that entertainment industry skills can be weaponized for military use, Martinez reflected. Blake noticed Martinez watching from his office window and gave him a respectful salute before returning to her training duties. Martinez returned the salute and smiled because he knew that Lisa Blake had transformed not just his unit, but his entire understanding of what made an effective soldier in the war against alien forces. The entertainment industry combat techniques that Blake had developed were now being taught at military academies throughout human space, and her methods had become standard training for all special operations forces. Blake has changed the course of this war by proving that creativity and adaptability are more valuable than conventional military thinking, Martinez said as he reviewed the latest battle reports. Lieutenant Kevin Ross nodded in agreement because he had witnessed the transformation of the Xeno Combat Division from a struggling unit with high casualty rates into the most effective fighting force in the human military. Sir Blake is requesting assignment to the new alien homeworld assault mission, Kevin reported. Approved immediately because if anyone can succeed against alien forces on their own territory, it will be Blake and her entertainment industry combat specialists, Martinez replied without hesitation. Martinez knew that the war was far from over but felt confident that human forces now possessed the creative tactical advantages necessary to achieve victory against enemies who had seemed invincible just months earlier.